You've got great historical perspective on this disaster in Texas. What have you learned?
Well, the overall idea is that, which we've talked about many times, is that a natural disaster doesn't really subtract from GDP. It's a terrible human tragedy, and for a certain particular localized area, it is a disaster. But for the overall nation, we see that the rebuilding efforts wash it out, basically, to use a bad metaphor, and you don't really see it in the data, and we saw that with Katrina. But for Houston, it's going to be a disaster. And I have a chart of what happened to New Orleans. When New Orleans experienced Hurricane Katrina in 2005, you can see GDP dropped, and then, of course, there was the further drop in the recession. It took until 2010 until GDP exceeded what it was before Katrina. And as you can see, it has flatlined since then. So many businesses moved away. It's been hard for New Orleans to recover. Houston, a bigger, more dynamic economy, may recover a little more quickly, but it's going to take a very long time.
Yeah, I think we had a major pipeline, Mike, being shut now 10 hours ago. How is it affecting American oil prices and oil prices from abroad? Well,
the irony is it used to be when you had a hurricane that it would shut in a lot of oil production, especially in the Gulf of Mexico. So much of that has moved onshore with fracking that oil prices are actually going down because oil's not been interrupted so much as gasoline production, and the refineries don't need the oil at this point. It's gasoline that's going to affect the U.S. economy, depending on how long those oil refiners are out of business. Houston area produces about 27% of American oil consumption, actually 60% of U.S. jet fuel, which means we could see air ticket prices go up if it's a long interruption. And if we see prices sustained higher, then Americans may cut back on spending in other areas. That's the national effect to look for.
What about other commodities?
Well, Houston is one of the nation's biggest ports, and a lot of commodities from around the world are imported through there, so that will slow down industrial production in the United States. And we'll also see an effect on the U.S. and the world from petrochemicals. It's 40% of the petrochemicals produced in the United States, and there's a chart that shows what happened after Katrina and Ike in that area. Big drop-offs in those in the production of those chemicals, and they're used in everything from your iPhone to your tires, toys. Everything that you buy has something in there from that, so that's going to have an impact as well. But as you can see, in those cases, it washed out relatively quickly. We'll see how quickly they can come back.
Mike, I want to go micro. You and I have teenagers, so we understand mold. It's not a joke.
No.
Every single house is going to be inundated with mold. That's a housing disaster. There's no other way to put it.
Well, we saw people from FEMA and the other responders yesterday beginning to talk about this and the fact that it's going to take a very long time to get a contractor to come to your house. And they were suggesting that people may want to start ripping out some of their walls and their carpets and things like that on their own to prevent mold, because obviously it can bring disease to a lot of people, make it hard to breathe, etc. This is a real concern for the people down in Houston.